Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Animal-Based Dad podcast. This is the show where between my guest interviews with subject matter experts and topic-specific deep dives, the aim is to arm you with actionable insights and information on how to prioritize your metabolic health and improve your overall health and well-being. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Animal-Based Dad podcast. I'm your host, Ricky du Plessis, and today I have a man who I've asked to be on the podcast because I've become a tremendous fan of his generosity and the work that he's doing, albeit unconventional, for the carnivore space. Mr. Christopher Brandlin, welcome.
Pleasure to be with you today, Ricky. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're most welcome, sir. Christopher, can you give us just a short overview for the audience? Who are you? Where have you come from? What is your interests? And we'll go from there.
Certainly. So I was an athlete most of my life. So I was a wrestler in high school. And then when I got into college, I became a personal trainer. And then I got into powerlifting. And although I had a lot of fun in college, I still took my athleticism to a different level. And once I finished college, I decided to go to law school. And when I was going to law school, I actually opened up my own personal training business. And since I stopped partying when I got into law school, since I had to take things a little bit more serious, I actually met with a dietitian who kind of focused on all natural bodybuilding, and I told him that I wanted to basically compete in all natural bodybuilding. Some of my colleagues, my other personal trainer friends, have said, "Hey, you have some good potential. Why don't you try to see if you can, train all naturally?" But I think when I was in college, I was floating between 180, 200 pounds. I was more of a power lifter, and I'm 5'9", so I'm not the biggest guy. I'm just a short Italian attorney. But anyways, he got to trim to like 3% body fat when I was at my best. And in 2010, I was winning, back to back. These are like, amateur, all natural bodybuilding, but it was still kind of advertised and it was still promoted. And I won Mr. Los Angeles Natural in 2010. That's what got me into the Muscle and Fitness magazine here in the United States. And I kind of kept promoting that even after I was, transitioning to practicing law. And then I passed the bar exam in 2011, and I've been an attorney ever since. But even since I passed the bar exam in 2011, I was still having a great intrigue and interest in the health and fitness community. So since I was so admired that my registered dietitian got me so lean with doing this carb cycling diet, with basically just going very strict ketogenic for most of the time and recycling on your carbohydrates, I wanted to get an additional credential in dietetics. So I got my AAS degree in dietetics, and then I got my DTR certification, which is a registered dietetic technician, basically, or they call it DTR, and it's kind of a step below a registered dietitian. And then I was considering getting the registered dietitian, but one of the problems was getting these contracts with hospitals, since I was a full-time attorney. So I ended up getting an MBA, and then I was pursuing it. Right now, I'm pursuing a PhD. And my PhD is actually in public policy administration. It's actually teaches individuals how to basically operate smaller and larger governments. But it's a huge crossover with public health. And we already discussed, and we'll discuss it again. And I had some big health scares in 2017, which is 6 years after I passed the bar exam. But just to save my life, I found the carnivore diet and a couple other kind of adjuncts, which I use to kind of maintain my natural health. And that's why I get so
Chris,
private.
You said save your life. I wonder if you wouldn't mind just walking us through what health concern did you go through? What happened?
Certainly. So roughly in 2016, I started, I was always training like at 4 or 5 in the morning. Even when I was practicing law, I tried to get a huge workout right before I went to the office. So I would do this routinely throughout the week. But I'm not sure if it was from too much work or too much traveling, but all of a sudden, in 2016, when I was waking up in tremendous pain, and I wasn't sure what was causing it, but it was systemic. It wasn't just one joint; it was head to toe. And I was getting very sick, all nauseous all the time, and then it transitioned to having tremendous gut problems. And I had made a major mistake by listening to some of my family members because I never usually went to the doctors. I was always, I don't need to go to the doctors unless something's wrong. So that was my kind of, my idea throughout college and law school.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what was going on. So I basically sought some medical attention with different GI doctors because it turned out to started getting like, more worrisome in the GI tract. And a lot of them just put me on a load of pharmaceuticals. And this was over the course of 1 or 2 years. It was everything very harmful, laxatives, basically corticosteroids, and they were trying to get the inflammation down by corticosteroids, which is not anabolic steroids, but it's still it's very problematic for immune system. And then they put me on a whole list of antibiotics, and it completely destroyed my gut to the point where a piece of my intestine got so inflamed. In 2017, they kind of referred me over to a surgeon, and he kind of promised that, he's like, look, I see this, I've done a scope of your intestines, with the colonoscopies and everything else. And I see this part of your sigmoid, they're part of your lower intestine that's really inflamed. And I can almost guarantee you, if we remove just this piece of your intestine, I think it was like 6 inches or so, you're going to feel so much better. I think this is the culprit. I think if we remove this, you're going to be so much better. And, I was very vulnerable because I was so sick and I wanted my life back. I was like, I miss training. I miss having a happy social life. And, I missed having fun, and I'm limited right now. This is really, depressing. So I agreed to the surgery, but it was the worst decision I've ever made for many reasons. One of them, they released me, first of all, right after they were doing the surgery, while they're still stitching me up. I woke up prematurely. I woke up too early right after they were cutting my intestine, and I woke up screaming in pain. And they had to give me I wasn't sure which other kind of narcotic, but they gave me a bunch of morphine. I remember that, to help me put me back to sleep. I woke up hours later, just very sick. And then a couple of days later, like, hey, we're ready to you're ready to go. And I'm like, I want to make sure my intestines are working. Should I make sure everything's kind of working and kind of having normal routine bowel movements before you guys let me out? And when I asked that, they said, oh, you're just, you'll be fine. A couple of days, things will just flow everything will flow smoothly and you'll be back to normal. And I went back home and I started getting these cramping pains. And it turns out that not only was everything kind of spasming up, but I developed these severe infections right afterwards. So a couple of weeks after that major surgery, it got so bad where I had a very bad swelling, and it looked like a grapefruit, like growing out of my intestine, basically a huge bubble, basically below my belly button. And when I took a photo of it, I was like, this is not normal. I'm used to having my 6-pack abs going out for Mr. Los Angeles to having a big like alien popping out of my stomach. What's going on? And he's like, go to the ER emergency, and they had to recut me open. He said it was mostly superficial, but I felt everything, and it was no anesthesia. I was fully awake. And this is how I developed the pain tolerance ever since then. I'm like, because I've got my intestines open more than once, and then they didn't want to sew it back up because the infection came from the inside. They said, we'll just change the gauze, and it kept getting infected. And they had to recut me open a couple weeks later. And it was getting so bad that I had to change the gauze out of this big infection out of my lower intestine twice a day. And when it was finally sealing up, I could still see it was getting infected. So what I did was I did a 10-day on my own. I did a 10-day water fast just to help me heal. That did help heal.
This episode is brought to you thanks to my work as a Enzino independent partner. To find out more about Enzino's product offering within test-based personalized nutrition, or to find out about how to join as an independent partner yourself and build a revenue stream in helping others take the guesswork out of their personal health journeys, please stay tuned because I'll be sharing information later in this episode.
And then I started, removing foods from my diet, and this got me into the carnivore.
Before we get into that, so the 10-day water fast, what was it that prompted you to do that? Had you read up on fasting before? Were you familiar with fasting?
There was some minimal literature, as you know, is basically from word of mouth and speak with other and see these testimonials. And when all else fails, the best thing you could do is fasting is the heal. And I spoke with a couple other colleagues from the fitness industry. And when they got very sick, they said, look, nothing else was healing, but I did. Most of them fasted for like a week or so. But, I was like, this is a very serious procedure. I want to make sure this never comes back. So I did a 10-day water fast. That helped heal, but I was still having some problems intermittently with, the moment I introduced the wrong food. And the problem is I actually went to a fasting clinic, which was good, but to oversee it, because supervised fasting, the last week I
Yeah.
was so
Especially the
adamant.
long fasting. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But almost I want to say almost every fasting clinic here in the United States it's run by vegans, and that's a problem because when they start introducing more plant foods, I was getting problems. I went back home like, oh, we
Um,
better go plant-based diet and all this. I was like, let me modify. I've tried fasting before this, anyways, for a couple days, but let me try
yeah.
this. I started just doing very minimal plant foods and more just quality animal foods, and I was like, look,
Mm.
at when I was competing in bodybuilding, I was doing all meat with a little bit of vegetables and but
Yeah.
I mixed in like some oil, avocado oils and nuts. So it wasn't completely carnivore, but it was still like the meats, whereas there's a lot of fish, chicken, and steaks was my main
Yeah.
source of my diet because I'm allergic to eggs. I can't even eat eggs. So I mainly had to do meat. And that's actually what got me in my best shape. And let me turn this up. But also, when I was reintroducing the plant foods, it was causing more inflammation. So when I started removing the plant foods, I started noticing I was like, I'm getting a lot better. And then I spoke with some other colleagues. They said, some people just, you know, do this meat-based diet. They eat nothing but
Mm.
meat, and supposedly, it's very promising. So that's where I started, consulting with different carnivores, and that's what got me into the
Okay.
carnivore community. I kind of bit more carnivore in 2018, and that's where I went over to Budapest, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah. To paleo medicine.
Yes, or known
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
Paleo
Dr. Clemens.
clinic. It's
Yeah.
Dr. Sophia Clemens. So I actually, before I went over there, it was a telephone call. It was with Michaela Peterson before she became popular,
Oh, awesome.
before she
Nice.
developed the Lion Diet, and
Yeah.
because she did a couple of I think it was some YouTubes or podcasts about her, like, reversing all these autoimmune conditions by,
Yeah.
carnivore diet. And I was like, I'll let you know my past, but I'm pretty wrecked up, and right now I'm finding that I can only eat meat, so I probably need to do this diet, but I need to see all the limitations what I cannot have, because
Mm.
I was still having, like, when I was introducing the meats and doing mainly meats, I was still introducing coconut oil and some other kind of plant-based kind of, like, fats.
Mm.
And she's like, no, you can't do coconut oil, and you basically just got to be eating nothing but meats, and you're going to be using tallow and lard to
Yeah.
cook everything. And she's like, I know, she kind of mentioned the Paleo Medicina clinic, that there was a clinic that actually focused on that. So
Cool.
I Skyped with Dr. Sophia Clemens. I went over to Budapest, Hungary in end of
Mm.
2018. And that's where I stayed with them for about 1 or 2 weeks. And I learned, and what was different is that they made sure that you ate nothing but quality, very high fat meats and no
Yeah.
supplement. And that was a huge kind of, concern at me at first. I was like, I was taking glutamine powder and like
Mm.
some, some, let's say some plant-based kind of, like, herbal, like homeopathy, basically, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
oregano oil from infections and all that. She's like, no, nothing, no supplements or
Stop
anything.
all.
You're just going to be doing meats. And I was amazed on how much progress, and I felt so much better.
Mm.
My gut was feeling amazing. I was getting more energy. My skin was looking better. I was like, I got to be on a carnivore diet for the rest of my life. But you know
Yeah.
what? I don't mind this. This is good. I feel so much better because I was so depressed. These suicidal tendencies after
So
the surgeries,
that
and yeah.
that was in early 2018 that you ended up in Hungary
It
with
was
Dr.
late
Clemens in
2000.
18.
Yeah, it was like late 2018. I think
Late 2018. Okay,
yeah.
cool. So by this point, you had been ill for 2 and a bit years.
It was starting to get bad like early 2016, I think, was
Yeah,
getting more problematic.
right. That's a
That's where I
long
started all
stretch
these
of
pharma.
time to
Yeah.
be unwell for. And
Yeah.
it sounds very cliche, and it's something that people, especially in the younger community, will tend to take for granted. I know I did. I was immortal when I was in my teens and early 20s or so, I thought, until something goes wrong. And then that reality slaps you square in the face, and you suddenly realize that, oh, no, you're not immortal. But the point I want to get to is our biggest asset is our health. And you can have the best career in the world. You can have all the money in the world. You can have the best looking girl on your arm or guy on your arm, whatever the case may be. When your health goes, all the rest of that sort of fades away and doesn't really matter, does it?
No, it doesn't matter because, and this is from personal experience, even after I started earning more money as a licensed attorney, I'll tell you right now, money does not make you happy, and people need to recognize that. There is a certain level of like having security and comfort so you
Hmm.
can pay bills, but having more is not going to necessarily make you happier. In fact, usually the highest suicide rates come from the
Yeah.
the most wealthy kind of individuals.
So you go through this 2 and a bit year period of being really unwell, and then you discover the carnivore diet. You have guided health and insights from Paleo Medicina, and you start to see improvements and feel well. Can you talk us through how profound that must have been? Because I can imagine I've got my own health journey, and I've been through not quite the depth and severity of the journey that you've been through, but
Sure.
I know the difference it made for me. But there'll be many people in the audience who are facing their health journey at this point in time, are looking for answers, but haven't found the answers yet and haven't experienced that coming out the other side of the dark tunnel. And so I think it would be good just to speak to what that change was for you and how that felt.
Yeah, and I can definitely elaborate more on that because, you know, going to the best shape in my life, then I had probably one of the happiest lives in college because not only was I like the top personal trainer at a gym, which was right down the street from a big university, I was also the fraternity president. So I was, I'll be honest with you, I was partying my ass
Mm,
off every
mm,
week because I was a fraternity president. I'd go to school, but on the weekends I would throw these major parties, and I had a really, really good dating life. I don't want to speak with too much because it's going to come back to me. But anyways, going from that kind of like, that kind of lifestyle and just a happy, and even when I was competing in law school, I still kept it happy because I was still having a great kind of dating life and I was winning a lot of awards. I was in the best shape of my life. But then when someone takes away your health basically, and if you're in that condition where you're basically like, locked to a bed and you can barely get up in the morning, you can't even exercise, it's very depressing. And I probably didn't mention to you, but I mentioned to a couple others, only a few others, but I got so bad to the point where I tried to end my life after the surgery twice because I was
sure.
so depressed. And fortunately I failed, but still that
Mm,
just shows you. But when I saw that there was light at the end of the tunnel, when I started seeing all these improvements after going to Budapest and back and coming back to the United States, and then just practicing exactly what they were preaching is basically just nothing but quality, is the best quality animal foods, because there are
mm,
carnivores that can
mm,
eat some pretty shitty meats. And yes, when you eat some very low quality meats, it doesn't mean you're automatically getting healthier if you're eating a bunch of hormone and infused kind of like
mm.
cattle. So it brought me out of depression. And now I feel motivated that I have to do something for the carnivore community, and that's why I even kind of advertise it on the prior podcast with Anthony Shafee and a couple others, is that I prefer to cater the carnivore community, and that's why I got
Nice. Yeah.
trademarked as the Carnivore Lawyer, is because I always tell them, you know, even if I don't practice every practice area, I'm more than welcome to speak with individuals, and a lot of them are here in California, and I'm doing. I also practice in Texas, but I also know general law in all 50
Hmm.
states. So if there's something I can assist with, even if it's non-litigation or transactional, I always offer my services. And as you see in the kind of LinkedIn as my main social
Yeah.
media platform, I'm always trying to do something for the community because I feel like I have an obligation to give back.
Well, that's absolutely awesome. And like I said at the introduction, that's one of the things I've come to really admire about you. Your generosity stands out. And then it's truly admirable. One thing the audience won't know, so we'll fill them in on this. So I've finished off the manuscript for what will be my first book, and you were one of the people kind enough to review it for me and to provide me with some constructive criticism and feedback, and it was tremendously helpful to me. And yeah, really appreciative
And
of
it's a very
the
well
input.
written manuscript too, so I was
Thank you.
impressed.
Yeah, yeah. So no, it's good. So I want to ask you two things, Christopher. I want to ask you, having been through this journey, what does metabolic health mean to you? And then what have you done today to invest into your own?
I think we have this prior discussion because your prior person on your podcast that I think did a podcast with me about a year ago, Martin, perhaps his last name is Gillespie. Is there some?
Gillespie,
Yeah,
yeah.
Gillespie. He focused on that same term, and before he mentioned that, it was never really brought to my attention too much. No one ever asked me, "What does it metabolic health mean to you?" And then, I kind of, but after looking at a lot of different individuals' descriptions of metabolic health, it's basically, how are you using food as medicine? And that's my best description is. Like, it's not only using food as medicine, but using your food as a proper energy source. And like a good example of the carnivore community is, a lot of people aren't doing used to doing a high fat diet for their energy and weight loss. And because throughout like the 80s and 90s, and even when you're younger, they're teaching you fat makes you fat. And it's the biggest myth of all. It's the sugar makes you fat. It's that so obvious. And when you start using the fat as a source of energy, and I think as a natural way of kind of nourishing yourself, you start realizing that not only you're not having any side effects from it, but you're feeling better every day. And you don't need to rely on any of these supplementation, all these bullshit pharmaceuticals that they're given for people when they're not feeling well. I mean, you don't need the pharmaceuticals. You need quality food as your medicine. And that's why my best description is, using food as your medicine.
Awesome. That's really cool. So what have you done today to invest into your metabolic health?
I mean, the carnivore was the biggest step. That was definitely the biggest step by all. I didn't mention this when we were prior discussing, but I elaborated a little bit, is that I promote oxygen-based therapies, and one of them is medical grade hyperbaric oxygen therapy, because right after these surgeries, I developed a very bad skin disease where it's usually some classify this as a cancer because you have to keep it in remission, but the skin disease, it's called pyoderma gangrenosum, and it starts off is you started having these bruises all over your body, and then these bruises turn into ulcerations, like very disgusting ulcerations. And I got so bad to a point where I had a bruise on my hip, and I thought it would go away, and then it started opening up like a wound, and it got so bad where it got very infected. And I remember I was like, how deep is this wound? I put my finger in my hip, and I could touch my hip bone, and I was like, oh my God, this is very bad.
Yeah,
so the carnivore diet was already mitigating some of the inflammation, but some of these really bad, systemic infections that won't go away, I learned medical grade hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So that's something I try to do at least a couple times a month. Medical grade, at least 2.0 atmospheric units, because as I mentioned before, that's where your body reaches angiogenesis, the creation of red blood vessels to actually regenerate damaged tissue. And not only that, I think at that level, not these soft zip-up chambers, but the medical grade level at 2.0 atmospheric units, that's where it becomes antimicrobial too. So if you have infections, you can use oxygen to not only heal you, but to kill off infections, because oxygen at a very high capacity become antimicrobial. In that same kind of respect, I started studying ozone therapy, and some people with bad infections, because one of the things that kind of, I believe, promoted this inflammatory kind of response for the couple of years, in addition to all these pharmaceuticals that the doctors gave me, was after the fact, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease and a couple of co-infections through, a big amount of blood tests that I did over the course of a couple of months. And to keep certain infections in remission, ozone therapy is recommended. And then there's a lot of adjuncts I learned after that, like red light therapy is something I try to use like almost like 5 times a week. Even have these full-size red light therapy beds at I have clients that are doctors, but I work with functional doctors. I don't like working with these conventional doctors. I just give pharmaceuticals to their clients. I like functional and regenerative doctors. So I've tried stem cells and exosomes. There's actually a good stem cell carnivore doctor, by the way. And if you're ever in Arizona, her name is Dr. Sabrina Solt. I remember that I had some arthritis in my back from prior injuries, and because I did a lot of stunts. A lot of stunts I did in college were unfortunately because I drank too much. I thought I could jump off a building, and I can't. But I remember I had a really bad damaged disc. I was like L4, L5. And it was getting really bad a couple of years ago, where I tried to lift something and then it just screwed up for a couple of weeks. I remember I went to her, and she extracted stem cells from my bone marrow. If you know how to get your bone marrow, you basically drill like a big needle into your pelvis and draw the bone marrow. It's a very thick red blood. And I was amazed because she did it so delicately. She's a carnivore coach and doctor, by the way, but she did it so good that I barely even felt the needle go into my pelvis. And when she injected it, combined that with exosomes, and you know what? As she did this like in October of last year, I felt so great that you saw me skydiving like last month too. I went skydiving. The landing didn't hurt. Even after I went bungee jumping in Las Vegas this past weekend, the landing was a little rougher than I thought, but I have no pain in my back. It's amazing. So exosome stem cells, I think regenerative medicine is something I want to promote. I don't like a lot of these big pharma medications because they have so many side effects. But when you think of regenerative medicine, that's something I like to combine with the carnivore. And one of those is peptide therapy. And these are different combinations of amino acids. You may have heard of BPC 157, which is I
have an acute interest in that. And I've been without an ACL in my left knee since 2003. I ruptured my ACL in my left knee playing rugby in high school in 2003. Had it replaced. They took a graft out of my hamstring and ruptured that again a year later because I was 17, 18 at the time and thought myself invincible. At that stage, I was built like a Greek god, had never had to put any dedicated work into it. All I did was participate in sports that I enjoyed, and the play was the exercise. And so I'd never had to put any serious work into my body before. And so I didn't rehab it properly because I just didn't have the discipline, didn't have the appreciation for how necessary it was. And a year later, ruptured again, had it taken out, didn't have it replaced again. My orthopedic surgeon, I forget his name now, Christopher Brandlin, I think it was, out of Entebbe Hospital in Durban. He passed away. He actually had a heart attack doing a cycling race a few weeks before I was meant to go back in and have it replaced the second time. And when that happens, and then they have to sort of sort out his estate and everything, like your medical records all get caught up in this for a little while. And I just never got around to it. So I learned to do without it. And it's been over 2 decades now. I was actually thinking about it this morning. I've had no ACL in the knee longer than what I had an ACL in the knee before it, which was quite profound to me this morning. I was like, wow, I've been doing without for a long time. But
and we're both turning, and we're both turning 40 this year. I think
correct.
I know that. Right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
I turned it in June, and you're in August, right?
August, yeah.
I got decent memory. Okay.
Yeah, good going. But BPC 157 has got some tremendous results from some of the literature I've come across for soft tissue recovery.
Yes.
And so what I'm talking to my surgeon about, because I'm in the process of getting the knee fixed, I've had them go in and take out the failed graft and all the anchor work for that, all the metal work and everything, and then give me some bone grafting to form the new anchor points for what will be the new replacement. And I'll get a cadaver Achilles and use that as the new replacement. It'll form the lattice because the cadaver tissue doesn't come back to life within you, but it serves as a lattice structure on which your own tissue then grows. But the literature that I've read suggests that BPC 157 speeds up that recovery process.
That, I would say you combine that with medical grade hyperbaric oxygen therapy, because the clinic that I send my clients to, because I'm a personal injury attorney too, I do 12 different practice areas, and one of them is personal injury. And if I have any clients that are not getting any kind of like improvement with conventional medicine like physical therapy, chiropractic, and they have, especially if there is a brain injury, if there is traumatic brain injury, TBI, I send them to medical grade hyperbaric oxygen therapy because
that's good.
I call my colleagues over there. Hey, I got this client. They're willing to pay cash out of pocket, but they need to get better, and they don't usually see results until they do the medical grade hyperbaric oxygen therapy because you heal 10 times faster than normal, and that's the whole that's the whole literature behind BPC 157. And there's also thymosin beta 500, which is usually combined with BPC 157 to produce like a really powerful anti-inflammatory response. But if you combine these with the carnivore-based diet, intermittent fasting, sometimes extended fasting when necessary, and then You know, you have a whole host of functions that you not only can improve your overall well-being, but promote your longevity. Because
Yeah.
I want to make sure that my 40th birthday in this June this year, I want to make it feel like my 30th. Because my
Well,
30th
yeah.
birthday, by the way, I started having all these problems right after I turned 30. And a lot of people,
Yeah,
I
interesting
realized,
that,
oh, orthopedic problems.
eh?
And I think you can recognize that after you turn 30, you can't get away with a lot.
Yeah, no, well, I think what tends to happen, and I had a similar conversation with Martin Gillespie last week. I think modern lifestyle is so far removed from what our physiology evolved on and needs as triggers and inputs for the different functions that we sort of get away with it through our childhood, teens, and 20s because we have what I'll call the elixir of youth on our side. We've got high testosterone. Like we're able to get away with a lot more punishment than what you can once you post 30. I think once you post 30, you then the chicken comes home to roost. Like the
Yeah, it's a wake-up
years,
call.
the years of suboptimal lifestyle hit you and hit you hard. And I think people mistake that as, oh, it's just aging. I think that's the wrong mindset. It's the wrong way to conceptualize it. I prefer to conceptualize it as you're living wrong. And this is your body screaming at you to say, you need to do this differently. I need a different stimulus, a different input, a different way of looking after me. Because when you do, and some of us are fortunate enough that we discover it in our 30s. I was fortunate enough to come across the ketogenic lifestyle in my 30s and sort of lead myself down the path of understanding nutrition better and understanding human physiology better because I just became more and more curious about why this was helping me. And you inadvertently avoid the trapping that unfortunately the majority of people fall into, which is they accept that they're just aging, and that all the symptoms and the issues that they're developing through their 30s and through their 40s are just aging. And then in their 50s, stuff starts to get so bad. And that's usually, if you speak to, you and I are both connected with a lot of health coaches. You go speak to health coaches and ask them the average age of their clients, and it's usually people in their late 40s, early 50s.
Yep.
And it's people who've gone so far down the road, they've got a couple decades worth of some serious damage from poor lifestyle under their belt. And then they're trying to sort of reverse it at that stage and undo it. And that's a hard battle to fight.
Yeah. And that's why, I'm kind of fortunate that I had my wake-up call in my 30s. And unfortunately, it's like my wake-up call is I had to remove a piece of my intestine after learning the failures of conventional medicine and how much damage it can do. But yeah, it's the wrong choices in your life that make you realize what you have to do, and you want to make sure you treasure. I mean, I value my health and my body so much right now. I couldn't believe I let that go away. And that's going to be part of my campaign too. As I told you, I'm going to be, it's going to probably go a little bit more public in the next couple of weeks, as I'm actually running for Congress, and that's going to be part of my campaign. And that's why I'm very fortunate to have a good campaign manager and her team that worked on Team Kennedy, because they
Awesome.
want
Yeah.
to promote natural and true real health to the community. Our focus is to get my focus is because I learned the damage personally of pharmaceutical medications, and that's why I want to kind of preach this to others. But I want to have, I almost want to have like a develop a new curriculum for all the medical institutions. I really wish that could happen. Is because the more and more I speak with my doctor clients, you learn that the doctors and medical schools nowadays, it's all based on pharmacology
Yeah.
and surgery.
It's a
That's all they're
massive.
teaching. In any kind of, nutrition is, if you consider the amount of time spent in medical school, many hours, and then you have your
Mhm,
residency
mhm,
program, depending on
mhm.
which kind of area you're going to be, practicing medicine in. But there's so many hours, and I think that the most prestigious medical schools, in the United States, I think their average was like 19 hours in nutrition, which is very little compared to when you think about like the
Oh, it's
10,000 hours that they're putting into.
yeah, it's a
But
fraction of a
that's actually
percent,
the
eh?
high range. And the more and more I learn, a lot of them are spending a couple hours in total in their entire medical curriculum is a couple hours of nutrition. And that's where I see it as a problem is there, instead of treating, the source, doctors are trying to treat the symptoms and they think of a pharmaceutical for all their problems. And I think that's why our country or our world, not only because I'm in the United States, you're in the UK, the entire world is getting sicker. It's because we're relying on pharmaceuticals and bad habits to, kind of live our lives. So that's going to be my campaign.
I think we've fallen into, how would I phrase this? I've given this a bit of thought and I've written a bit on it for my Substack. I think if you look at how the discipline of medical practitioners came about and follow it from its roots, it came about at a time in human history where infectious disease was our biggest problem. Infectious disease and acute trauma were our biggest killers. And it developed processes and systems and procedures for dealing with infectious disease and acute trauma, for which pharmacology is very useful. If you've got a systemic inflammation.
There's certain pharmaceuticals that do come in handy as a last resort.
Yeah. So the efficacy of pharmacology, I would say, is better in the space of infectious disease than it is in chronic disease.
Hey everyone, I hope that you are enjoying the discussion so far. I apologize for interrupting the episode, but I just want to take a moment to talk to you about the work that I do with Zinzino. Zinzino are a brilliant Scandinavian biotech and life sciences firm. Their concept of test-based personalized nutrition is absolutely revolutionary, and they are the pioneers of test-based personalized nutrition. I use their products and solutions myself and my family. In fact, we use multiple of their products. And Zinzino has been instrumental in helping me identify that I was omega-3 deficient, horrendously so, and to get my omega-3 deficiency resolved. You see, their at-home tests give you the data and insights needed to inform your dietary strategy to see whether you have any key essential nutrient deficiencies or imbalances that need addressing. And where you do, they have targeted supplementation stacks that are personalized to you according to your age, sex, and body weight, which means they are most effective to get you back to optimal. This isn't about just avoiding deficiency. This is about getting you back to optimal, and that's a complete and utter game changer. So if you would like to know more, I have linked a short survey in the episode description. Complete the survey. It asks you some simple questions about your health goals and desires. It takes less than a minute to complete, and what I'll give you off the back of that is a personalized product recommendation out of Zinzino's solution catalog, telling you which I think best suit your desires and needs and why. I'll then also personally reach out to you to see if there's any questions or queries that I can answer. Let me take the guesswork out of your health journey.
And unfortunately, in recent times, certainly in the last 50 to 70 years, what we've seen is wholesale shift away from infectious disease. We still have infectious disease. We still have acute trauma. They're still there. There's still problems. But we've seen this rise in chronic disease to the point where 5 out of our top 10 causes of death are from chronic illness, things that are not infectious, things that you catch because you've got a misalignment of lifestyle, whether it be your diet or environmental exposure to things that you shouldn't have, not getting enough of something that you should have, UV light, for instance. We live in a world now where chronic disease has become by far our biggest medical issue, but we're still trying to treat it the way we used to treat infectious disease. And I think that's where the system has it wrong.
And I can state for the record that since I handle some medical malpractice cases still, it's very expensive for a plaintiff's point because we have to front all the costs as the attorneys. But one thing I've done is I've been reviewing a lot of different medical records, including wrongful death matters. And what you're seeing is when you look at their medical records for the past 5 years before they pass away, you start to realizing that it is not only they have these chronic conditions that you're just talking about were actually the main cause of their death, but then all of a sudden, like let's say for example, there's a lot of fraudulent death certificates here in California right around the time of COVID, because a lot of them were putting, I'm not sure if you heard about this, but I've witnessed it myself, because they're listing COVID as the cause of death when it was completely the 20 other problems that he had that caused the death. And one of them was chronic conditions leading to kind of heart failure, and it had nothing to do with COVID. And I looked over one of them. One of the deaths I was actually doing a trust litigation for, because we're fighting, we had different of his family members fighting over, and his ex kind of girlfriend fighting over his money after he died. We investigated all of his medical records to see what was the cause of death. And they even listed like COVID as the cause of death on the death certificate. But when I did a detailed search on the last 5 to 10 years of records of all of his medical records, he was in the hospital every couple months for heart conditions, problems. And you look at, he was severely diabetic, and he was creating his own problems, is in other words. And that's why I kind of spoke out against this whole COVID, pardon my French, but bullshit that was propaganda that was pushed by all these different hospitals and the media. And I think the media is a huge problem when it comes to creating these chronic conditions. Is they're basically not promoting any natural health. They're promoting a lot of, look at you, what do you see on the media? You're not seeing like the healthiest foods in the media. You're seeing junk food, you're seeing alcohol, you're seeing cigarettes, and you're seeing vaccines. And, even though certain pharmaceuticals can serve a purpose in a last resort, the COVID vaccine was one of the most suspicious and biggest problems as you could ever witness. It's because of development. And that's part of my PhD dissertation topic, actually, which is very interesting. But that's something I've been told that I have to keep quiet, and people threatened to report me to the California State Bar for reporting this. And this is where I saw this as a huge problem. Like, no, I'm going to speak my honest, true opinion of what I believe. So the whole purpose
power to that.
And you brought up a very good point, Ricky, is that these chronic conditions are the major problems that we're not addressing, and these chronic conditions are caused by our lifestyles. And not only what we're doing the other day, we're stuck in offices, and that's why I try to get outside. And on the weekends, I force myself to get out in the sun. I force myself to do stunts on the weekends, and that's why I not only just jump out of planes and off the buildings, but I still try to do my random rock climbing. I still do my activities, and I still go out and try to train. And when I go out to work out, if it's on the weekends, if it's warm enough, I prefer to work out at the park. I can still do a good amount of push-ups and pull-ups, and I can actually do handstand push-ups too. So I'm one of the few
very
attorneys.
Impressive, I do a bit of calisthenics myself, but I'm shorter than you are. I'm 5'8", but I am 100 kilos. So what is that? That's 220 pounds.
Yes.
So stocking.
I'm 5'9", 150, but I got a smaller frame then. Let's just say that. Yeah, so when I was competing in all natural bodybuilding, those photos, it actually wasn't that much heavier. I think it was 157 pounds when I won Mr. Los Angeles Snatch. I had a little bit more muscle, but I was in the best condition of my life.
Good body composition, good ratio.
And symmetry was a whole thing. And that was kind of like my main concern is going to, as I got older, it's like, I can't keep that same kind of condition. It's going to be very difficult to keep your peak when you're in your 20s, just like you when you're training in your 20s, right? It's just, but you want to keep something that you can maintain throughout the week, and you want to get something that you kind of improve your overall longevity. I have some family members on my father's side. I mean, they live to nearly 100, and my goal is to break 100. And I think that should be a focus for everybody too.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd like people to also separate lifespan and health span in their minds and hold the two as separate entities, because I think society tends to over-focus on lifespan and wanting to live for as long as possible. But what people don't seem to do is want to focus on their health span, meaning the quality of your health, keeping that as high as possible for as long as possible across the duration of your lifespan. Because what we tend to see, and I know it's like this in the UK, I can imagine it's exactly the same in the US, people hit their sort of 50s, 60s, And then they're on a whole bloody tray worth of pills that they take daily, or all of their repeat prescriptions, but they're suffering declining health over decades until eventually 70, 80, maybe late 80s, their body finally gives in and they die. But
Yeah.
they suffer for decades leading up to that. I lost family members in the dedication to my book. I talk a bit about it because had I known what I know now, I may not have changed their outcome. I may not have been able to convince them, but I would have loved to have at least had the opportunity to lay out the information for them and give them a choice. Because I watched them, and this is all through the gift of hindsight, which is always 2020, but knowing what I know now, looking back on the situation as it unfolded, I can see how they did the best they could under the advice that they were given. But the advice that they were given was unfortunately incorrect. And they just declined in chronic disease, just declined and suffered for decades, and then eventually passed. And the worst part about it is at the end, their passing comes as a relief because you at least then think to yourself, well, their suffering's over. And that's not how we're meant to be. We're meant to be healthy and vibrant and sharp and functional all the way through. And then at some point in later life, whether that be 90, whether it be 100, whether it be beyond 100, your health is meant to fall off a cliff and then you die.
Yeah, that's that, and you bring up a good point too, is that, I look at it, not only do I do trust litigation. So I do most of my practice area right now, actually the majority of my practice is probate and trust litigation. It's usually when people are fighting over dead people's money, but I also do with conservatorships where some people are about to pass away and need to manage their funds and kind of their estate, and decide who's going to be managing like all their estate by the time of their passing. So a lot of times I have brothers and sisters fighting over the dead parents' money, and you kind of look back at the person's life before they passed away. And I always kind of bring that idea as like, if you can improve their quality of life, the last 10 years of your life, it would probably be the most valuable thing that you can give. And that's why, I always bring that up to all of my older clients when they come in and they're like, oh, I got to take my medication. They take out a pill box. I'm like, my God, you got like an encyclopedia of all these pills you got here. What's going on? And I was like,
right.
oh my, but this is the problem that they tell us, like, well, my doctor says to take this for my liver, but it could cause side effects. So I have to take this pill to manage those side effects. And then if I get tired, I have to take this pill. But then if I can't sleep at night, I have to take this pill. I was like, do you see the pattern? Do you see that this is leading to one thing to another? And, that's why I kind of tell them, I was like, you may want to, what is your diet? And they're like, well, my doctor never asked me about my diet. I was like, well, don't you think your doctor, before putting you on a load of medication, should ask you about your lifestyle and diet you have a daily basis? Because there's 168 hours in a week. And this is what I used to tell my clients when I was a personal trainer. I'm like, they're like, hey, I'm going to see you twice a week, and I want to make sure I get really good shape. I want to lose about 50 pounds. I'm like, so here's something you got to realize is, you're going to see me 2 hours a week. That's fine. We're going to get some great exercise. You'll burn some calories, and you'll see some kind of habits that you want to keep throughout the week. But there's 168 hours in a week, which means that you have 166 hours on your own. I mean, when you do the math, you got some people 6 to 8 hours a night for sleep, and you got 40 hours a week for work. They're still going to leave a lot of their time, but if you're eating a bunch of shit, the remaining 60 or 70 hours throughout the week that you have on your own, that's going to really negate anything I'm doing for you. It's not going to really make a difference.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
A lot of people don't realize that, what they do through a majority of the week really decides that they're going to be, feeling and looking throughout their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they sit completely sedentary outside of the time that they see you as well, and don't keep an active lifestyle, and then wonder why the little bit of effort that they put in is not reaping the rewards that they wanted.
Yeah. And your goal, it should have been like my goal, and kind of like, even though it wasn't really my goal, it's just something that came into play during college and law school. And even the first couple of years after passing the bar, I never had to see a doctor. I didn't have any problems. Your goal is you shouldn't have to see a doctor. And we explained this when we spoke last, Ricky, is that there may be a little distinction between United States healthcare system and your health care system in the UK, because
Yeah.
there's a common saying here in the United States that a patient cured is a customer lost, because most of the doctors in the United States, especially the primarily conventional doctors, the patients won't really be patients. They'll be customers. They'll be repeat customers.
Repeat customers.
And they'll tell them that, okay, I'm going to put you on this medication. We're going to see how it works. And if it works, then we're going to keep you on this medication. If it doesn't, we're going to put you on another medication on top of that. And you're going to see it in 2 to 3 weeks. And then instead of just getting something resolved in kind of improving your health where you don't have to see the doctor again, the doctor wants you to keep seeing them, and you're getting on more and more medications, and you're developing more and more problems. And I see that as a major problem here in the United States. And I said, you will never, in the United, it may be different in the UK. I understand that, Ricky, because you guys have probably, who knows, a better healthcare system. But in the United States, you'll never hear a doctor tell a patient, my goal is for you to never see me again, or have to see me again, or you'll feel better. You'll never have to come to the hospital. You'll never hear a doctor say that. You may hear some functional doctors say that. And Anthony Shafee, that's something he recommends too, is he still does his consults, and he says, I want you to kind of set you on your way. And that's what should be promoted in medicine, is instead of just being like a routine customer at a hospital of just taking pharmaceuticals on a daily basis, which is going to make you sicker and more bedbound. The doctor should really say, okay, let's see how much sleep you get in the night. Well, you need to focus on your sleep, or you're going to sleep too late. How about you shut off all the lights in your room? You need to get like a really good circadian rhythm going. How much sunlight you get in throughout the week? Are you snacking throughout the day, or are you just eating solid, meals to nourish yourself? And what is your level of sugar that you intake? You'll never hear doctors ask these lifestyle and dietary questions, which I see as a major concern here in the United States. But
it's the same here. Don't worry. It's the same here. So again, coming back to the wrong model of health management, we know the chronic disease is lifestyle based, and yet all of pharmacology is focused on symptom management. And that makes sense from a pharmaceutical point of view. If I was Mr. Pharmaceutical, that was my company, how do I make profit? Because I have to make a profit. I'm not a non-for-profit. I have to make a profit. How do I make a profit? I have to get repeat customers. If I sell you something, it works once, you never use it again, great. The only way I can profit off of that is I charge the absolute earth, and then a very small percentage of people can only afford it. Or I have to make sure that it does something that gives you a benefit, helps you manage a symptom, helps you feel a bit better, but it doesn't cure the disease. It doesn't address the root cause. And that's a bugbear that I have with the medical system so far as its approach to chronic disease is concerned here in the UK, that so few are willing to have the conversations with you about lifestyle, about what you're doing. And many of the ones who do, because there are some who do, and I want to give them credit, but the ones that do tend to just fall on government guidelines. And as you and I both know, that's complete and utter hogwash.
And this is actually one of the reasons I stopped my my RD program, because when I was going to get my master's in dietetics, and this is why I went to get my master's in business administration instead of my MBA, is because when I spoke with one of the head dietetic department at USC, they're like, hey, you have really good credentials. You're a full-time attorney, you're licensed in multiple states, you got everything. So why do you want to be part of our dietetics program? And I said, well, I think someone needs to speak about different changes in the nutritional guidelines for the United States, and people are getting overweight for a reason. I mean, our health is declining, it's not improving. And I basically told them, you need to flip the food pyramid upside down. And a lot of it looked at me in despise. And if you looked at these directors for these master's program, like 5 overweight women with very skinny legs. So it was kind of weird. That's why I call them pigeons when I did that podcast with Anthony Shea, but it's the most accurate description. If there's a show called The View here in the United States, you may have seen it.
Yeah.
Look like The View, like Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar, like some very, obnoxious overweight women. That was the directors. When I said you need to flip the food pyramid upside down, they're like, you're not going to be a good fit for us. And I was like, you know what, this is why, but it created more opportunities for me. And now I'm going to be running for Congress and trying to promote some good board for our country. And I think with your manuscript, you could be doing something the same for the UK. Actually, if not, you could do something worldwide with your manuscript.
That's my sort of hope for the podcast as well. It's benefited me tremendously. And we'll touch on my backstory a little bit quickly. So I, without realizing it at the time, and I didn't have the depth of knowledge necessary to articulate it, but in early 2018, and it's really for many years leading up to then, but early 2018 was the sort of crossroads for me, the point of crisis. My health had been failing and getting worse and worse and worse. And I struggled with binge eating. I struggled with low mood. I'm pretty sure I was pre-diabetic, like on the cusp of type 2 diabetes, just looking back, knowing what I know about symptoms now and thinking about what I was going through at the time. But I came to the point where, despite being physically active, because I've always been an active guy, and I've been in the gym sort of 3 to 4 days a week, every week for many, many years, but I was getting fatter and fatter and fatter, and I looked like a prop, to use a rugby analogy. But not like an international prop. I looked like your local club prop who loves these cheeseburgers and fries. And I was just getting bigger and fatter and rounder. I was strong. I could lift a lot of weight. I could run a 5K if I had to. I don't enjoy running, but if I had to, I could run 5Ks. And I was just getting fatter and fatter, but I was facing mental decline. And I was really, really struggling with binge eating, like sweet stuff. Like they called me Captain Biscuit, as I spoke about in Martin Gillespie's podcast, because in the office, and it's a very British thing, you'll have like tins of biscuits around for when you have your tea or your coffee. And I would climb into that. But once I had one, I'm someone who struggles with alcoholism. So I stopped drinking in 2023, September of 2023. So I understand addiction better now, and I can talk to it, and maybe people in the audience who have had similar or are going through similar can relate. But the compulsion to have more becomes something that you can't control. It's gluttony in the worst form. So you have one, and you have to have another one, and you have to have another one, and you don't want more, because now you're starting to get embarrassed because people are taking notice and they've given you a nickname and it's become a joke, but you have to have more and you have to have more. And I started to get physically ill. I would go off to the men's room and I would sit there and I'd be on the verge of throwing up, and I'd be splashing water in my face and sort of trying to pep talk myself and figure myself out. And I was in a bad, bad place, but I looked at my wife, and my wife had lost a lot of weight at that point, and she had done it through severe calorie restriction. And I'm someone who loves food, and I was having this issue with the binge eating. So the thought of having to go through severe calorie restriction scared the hell out of me, to the point it spurred me on to go and look out of desperation, pure and utter desperation. Is there any other way? Can I find any other way that will let me eat my fill, but still get the results I want? And it was almost like a Hail Mary, where you jump on Google and you're just like desperate, like, come on, there must be something. And I stumbled across ketogenic diets, and I was like, oh, hang on a second. What's this? Like,
more fat, lose weight.
This sounds too good to be true. Like, I can eat lots of meat. I love meat. I'm South African. Like, we grew up on meat. Like, this is part of my culture. And so I did a bit of reading on it, and I was like, okay, well, I'll give this 3 months. I'll give it a 3-month trial. Let's just see what happens.
Given you've made it this far into the episode, I can only assume that human metabolic health is a subject you find fascinating and engaging, and it resonates with you, and that's absolutely awesome because we're very much alike in that regard. And because of that, I want to take a moment to talk to you about potentially becoming a Zinzino independent partner in the same way that I have. You see, Zinzino have tremendous opportunities available for independent partners, meaning people who decide that they don't just want to be a customer, but instead want to use the concept of test-based personalized nutrition to benefit their own health, to take the guesswork out of their own health journeys in the same way that I have, but then to build that user story, to build that testimony of the differences that's made in our health journeys, and use that to market Zinzino's product, to market the concept of test-based personalized nutrition in the exact way that I'm busy doing right now, and bring on board other customers and other partners to grow the distribution network. And in doing so, you get handsomely rewarded through their compensation scheme, which is one of the best that I've seen in the industry. So if you'd like to explore setting up a side revenue, whether it be something that you only do a couple hours a week or something that you put a little bit more effort into and build into a full-fledged career, or anything in between, get in touch and let's have a talk about the opportunity and how this might be the right fit for you, not only to take the guesswork out of your personal health journey, but to also build you additional income streams that help to improve your financial situation and the possibilities for you and your family.
And suffice to say, like this was early 2018. It's now early 2025. I've gone from ketogenic to carnivore to what I would now call, I hate that Paul Saladino got to the term before me, but animal-based. I don't eat loads of fruit and stuff like that. I don't think that fruit is necessary. But through the literature review that I did for my book, I've settled on what makes the most sense to me is Dr. Ben Dorr's take, is that human beings are hypercarnivores, meaning that we are designed to get our optimal nutrition from animal-based foods. Like animal-based foods are the optimal diet for a human being. But we also have the digestive flexibility to include some plants and fungi, depending on our personal epigenetics, what we tolerate, what we don't tolerate, and everyone needs to figure themselves out. But it just adds that little bit of variety. So if you can take the time to figure out what you tolerate well, that doesn't cause you any issues, then you can include a little bit of that just to give you some variety and to make things a bit more sustainable, a bit more interesting. And I've settled into that sort of space where 80 to 90% of what I eat is fatty red meat or seafood. And then I'll have a little bit from the plant kingdom. For example, when we spoke last, I had like ribeye steaks with a bunch of butter on it, and then I'd smash up an avocado and put an avocado on that, just because it added a little bit of different flavor, but also added some good fat for that.
And that's the safest probably plant source that you can have for avocado. And that's why you'll see a lot of carnivores. I don't really personally eat it, but I know a lot of my colleagues, they include the avocado, and you'll see a lot of the carnivore kind of recipes. They'll kind of, even though it's not, carnivore, but the avocado is the safest kind of like, plant source when you're kind of like adding in some fats or, anything else that's outside of that too. So, and that's why, you bring up a good point about because there is a lot of different literature on, what humans were eating millions of years ago. And I think it was Dr. Stock. I forget, he's the dentist, carnivore doctor.
Kevin Stock. Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin Stock. Yeah. I think he said that, the evidence found that fruit was seasonal at least a few weeks of the year. And
it
I know
depends on where you were, though. So there's evidence to suggest that the closer you were to the tropics, the more available fruit would have been for longer periods of the year. But again, not the same fruit all year round. You would have still had seasonality, but you would have had a higher degree of fruit. And the increased UV exposure from being in the tropics, it goes down a very scientific rabbit hole here, which at a high level, as I understand it, the increased UV exposure helps to remove deuterium from your system more effectively. So you can get away with a higher carbohydrate load. Where if you
I
go into the north or the south hemisphere and you start to move away from the tropics where you're not getting as much UV exposure, you lose that benefit, and you can't get away with as much of a carbohydrate load.
Yeah.
So there's nuance to it.
And I know it, like, every person responds differently, but that's why I give respect for Paul Saladino, but I know for personally, I just can't sit well with fruits and honey. I think when I tried honey, it just got so much problems. I was like, fuck this, I'm not doing it. But it's even rougher for me because I got to do pure line because I'm allergic to dairy and eggs. I can have a little bit of grass-fed butter without any kind of problems, but eggs, I can only have duck eggs. And I think I may explain this to you last time. If I have any pork or chicken, I got to have corn-free and soy-free chicken or pork. And there's very few farms, United States, that actually have that. But when I was staying with the Paleo Medicina Clinic, all of their pork was corn-free, soy-free. And that's why I felt so amazing after eating pork. Have you ever ate a bad quality kind of meat or pork and just felt like complete shit afterwards? Yeah, it's true that you can eat some bad quality meats. And that's what part of my campaign too, Ricky, is that I'm a huge supporter of American farmers. And I believe you probably are out in the UK, right?
Yeah,
you got to make
absolutely.
friends with your butchers and you're good friends with your farmers. And that's a huge problem we're having here in the United States is a lot of the farmland is getting bought out. I mean, the stories are kind of like leading evidence that Bill Gates is buying it out for all of his lab-grown meat factories, and that's a huge concern. And it's really taken away a lot of business from these hardworking American farmers who should be receiving more subsidies to basically put some real quality food on our plates. And that's why I don't really. If you see all these LinkedIn posts, I buy from like over a dozen different farms. Actually, I looked at it the last couple of years. I think I bought from like 25 different farms in the United States. But I like to support all of them because they're all promoting the good word. And
nice.
That's why I don't focus on one of them. And that's why I brought all those steaks to my high school wrestling team because
I'm
like
I love that
sponsor. And I'm like, hey guys, I don't want you guys eating this all-you-can-eat buffet. I want you guys to eat strong and hard, but I want you guys to eat some quality meats. And that's why I gave them like $500 worth of meats. And I do that for too. And I do that during the holidays. Everybody brings like sweets, but I was like, hey, let's get some quality ribeyes for everybody. So
no, that's good. I enjoy that. Yeah, the cottage that I rent is actually completely surrounded by farmland. My landlord has got his farmhouse about 500 meters across the fields from us, and we're completely surrounded by his meadows. And he's got 126, I think he said, hoggets, which is like lambs but slightly older, busy fattening up out in pasture here, getting ready for market in March. So, it's good.
So you mentioned something earlier that I want to kind of bring up. We're talking about these people developing chronic conditions, and I do see a major problem with the media here in the United States. I'm not sure if it's the same here in the UK, where people are so easily manipulated by bad information. And one of them is these huge scares. And this is why I brought up a huge thing back when we're having our COVID-19. I'm not going to call it a pandemic, call it a plandemic or a scandemic, because I think it's complete bullshit. But a lot of these people, they're so easily manipulated that, when they believe that these vaccines are going to save their life or make them a lot better, they'll never get it. They become reliant on it. And that was my huge concern here in the United States about people developing these chronic conditions. And we got to the point, and I think I mentioned this earlier, we got people that are so stupid and manipulated that they're driving around in their own cars with the mask on. And I kind of gave you, and that's a problem. Look at in their own cars by themselves with a mask on, and they're wearing latex gloves and a face shield with a mask and shoe coverings. They're getting that. I think that's a huge problem, and that's where we hit rock bottom. I wasn't sure but it sounded like in the UK you guys are waking up a little faster than we are, correct?
Yeah, I'd say that there's definitely there has been an awakening, and we see it now with what's going around at the moment. It's a bird flu. And you'll see them start to sort of hype up the fear train regarding the bird flu. And maybe it's just an echo chamber. I can't say for sure, but certainly everyone in the social media space that I'm involved with is sick and tired of the nonsense now and just not having it. So yeah, maybe it's just small pockets of us, and we're each other's echo chamber. So maybe it's not representative of the whole, but it certainly feels like the majority of people who were concerned during the COVID era, talking 2020, 2021, 2022, thereabouts, a lot of those people are now looking back and sort of going, you know what, we're not going to fall for that nonsense again. Like you stop.
Yeah,
Like I'm not even interested.
I'm glad. I mean, do you still have, I mean, one of our problems with the RFK kind of brought up too, and I'm really supporting him proposing this, is to limit the amount of advertising by pharmaceutical industries. Are you having is it also a problem
We
in the UK?
actually,
Pharmaceuticals have a lot of advertisements?
I don't watch live television, and I haven't for many years. Mostly
Well,
because I don't want
it's
to
only
pay.
on television. It's ads throughout social media, and you'll see these banners, and you're going through YouTube, and you'll see a commercial saying like "brought to you by Pfizer."
Yeah, we don't
COVID.
actually, we don't get that. I stand to be corrected, but I think there is a law here within the advertising space that prevents pharmaceuticals from advertising. Certainly not the same way that they do in the States. Like
No,
I
no, the
spent
states they're advertising quite a bit, and that's
yeah, I
a huge.
spent a year in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale. Oh, this is long time back. Feels like a previous life, but it astounded me. Like this was pre-pandemic. We're talking 2004, so
Yeah,
long
that's when
time
I was actually in
pre-pandemic,
college.
and the amount of advertising for pharmaceuticals, like OxyContin, was like a big one. Like,
Oh yeah, it was all over the place.
dear
This is
goodness.
before COVID. It's always been present, and that's why people. And it's an easy way to manipulate the public. Is basically they'll think they just watch television, they see these ads, and they're seeing it everywhere.
Mm.
They're telling them, "Well, have you got your flu shot this year? Like, are you having problems with the are you having liver malfunction, cirrhosis, or are you having pancreatic problems, or are you having migraines?" Well, and not
Mm.
whenever they read off the side effects, you notice that they read them off very fast, and where you can't even
Yeah,
understand it. You'll see
yeah.
all these happy people in the commercial, like, oh, they're happy again. He's with his grandkids, but all of a sudden, like, the side effects will be like, basically, well, like, heart failure, like, blood clots, and like, erectile dysfunction. You're like, wait, I'm getting this for a pain medication, but now I can't get my dick up. Like, this is something I probably need to know, and this is some people probably need to realize
Oh,
that there's always going to be some side effects. And yeah, as you may know, I have a very strong sense of offensive humor, and that's probably the other thing that's on. So
I share it. Don't worry, I share it.
I can.
I love upsetting people on social media. It's one of my favorite pastimes because, yeah. Yeah, I think what would be good for society is to start to recognize that we need to take agency over our own health again. We've been brought up, certainly, like you and I are the same age, and I grew up in South Africa, you grew up in the States, obviously. But growing up, for me, you were taught to outsource your health. You sort of, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. So you were taught to treat your health reactively. And what I mean by that is you wait for something to go wrong. And then when something goes wrong, you outsource the fact that it's gone wrong to someone. You have to go see someone, and they have to help you diagnose what's gone wrong. And then they have to give you something to make it better. You're taught to outsource your health. You weren't taught to take ownership of your health and to look after it proactively. And I think that's a shift that we see coming. And it's something that I really hope gains a lot of traction, is that people start to move toward preventative health, wanting to understand. You see a lot more data becoming available to people. So like Aura rings and like the little, the worn gadgets that will show
Yeah.
you what your sleep's been like, how good your workout was, what your resting heart rate, so on and so forth. And even blood testing is now starting to come on leaps and bounds. Dry blood spot testing that you can do sort of from your home rather than having to go to a phlebotomist or to the doctor or something like that, which just
Yeah,
makes it far more
that's something I personally did as well.
accessible.
So in the last couple of years, that's why instead of just getting an appointment at doctors, is you can actually print out like you can get a lab order online with certain companies that are part of these health communities they'll give you a lab order, and then you could just order a blood test, and you can actually just do it at home, or you can get a quick appointment at any kind of like local blood testing kind of facility and just do it on your own without having a doctor oversee it. And then a you'll have a functional doctor, or at least some health coach. They'll just kind of make the disclaimer that I'm not a licensed physician, but I can give you my general thoughts on, your blood test, your cholesterol. And then you'll start learning that, the cholesterol readings are a huge myth, that you actually need cholesterol. We need our hormones. And that's why these people that are trying to go so low on cholesterol on all this medication, I mean, their hormones go out to shit, and then their sex life is horrible. And I'm like, yeah, because you took your cholesterol out of your life. You need your cholesterol. That's another thing that you need to kind of promote your longevity.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Statins are, I stand to be corrected, but I think they are the most profitable drug in the history of pharmaceuticals. Statins.
Yeah, that's understandable.
And the funniest part about it is you'll be prescribed statins to manage your cholesterol, but then you'll be prescribed all sorts of other things to manage the side effects that you're getting from the statins. And it's just like, come on.
It's just going to downward spiral of just medications. And that's something, and you probably can see that, well, maybe it's not in the UK, but in the United States, if the high rates of kind of like statins as being like the most prominent kind of pharmaceutical that are given out is just because there's so much advertising telling people that cholesterol is bad, and they get so easily manipulated that they have like, oh, I gotta get my cholesterol levels down. I gotta get it down below 200. And they'll just rely on the statins to do that. And then they're on a load of pharmaceuticals to treat those side effects. And that's,
and the doctors are hot for it. Yeah, too. I say that when I first went ketogenic, a way into it, I asked my doctors to do a full blood panel on me because I wanted to sort of see what was going on. And the first doctor did it without asking any questions, just thought, okay, routine, like good to get a bit of an insight. And then the second time I went and asked, I'd just gone carnivore. So we're talking July 2022. I went carnivore in June 2022. And then that July, I was like, okay, well, I want to try and get something with a baseline and then maybe follow it up in 6 months to a year to see what the change has been. And I called up and I had to explain why I wanted the full blood panel done. And the doctor told me, you're not following the dietary guidelines, so I'm not going to waste NHS resources on that. Like you'll have to go and pay to do it privately if you want to do experiments on yourself. And
that's ridiculous. Well, but as an eye opener for you, because you're like, hey, I'll just do my blood testing on my own because he's going to tell me to include more carbohydrates and grains and less meat, and that's the complete opposite of what I should be doing.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was absolutely it. But the thing that astounded me was the line of questioning, because it was, why do you want this done? It's not, hey, good, you want to take some ownership of your health? Let's help you get the diagnostics. Let's help you get the insiders. Why do you want this done? What symptoms are you having? Like, well, what's the problem? What makes you think that you need a full blood panel? Like,
it's surprising that someone wants to take care of their health, probably.
Yeah, but it's that reactive mindset that we need to hopefully in time we'll see people shift away from that and shift to preventative health as the mindset, like wanting the data, wanting to understand what's going on with them so that they can inform their strategy as they go.
Agreed. No, definitely. So that's something we're really pushing here for the United States too, is that people should take some ownership of their own health, and that's why we're trying to limit the amount of advertising that's done by the pharmaceutical industry. And I'm not sure if it's ever going to happen soon, but I'm really hoping to change their curriculum behind the medical institutions for what they're teaching their students in medical schools. But also, I mean, I'm a dietetic technician, so I got credentialed through the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics program, the A&D, and they're telling you the same problem is like, they're like, you're going to limit your meat consumption. And it's a huge thing they're pushing on, and they're promoting plant-based meats. I'm like,
have you looked into? Are you familiar with Belinda Fettke?
It sounds slightly familiar, but I have to probably research a little bit more.
You need to look her up. Belinda Fettke is married to Gary Fettke, who is the orthopedic surgeon over in Tasmania.
Okay. I know Fettke sounded familiar. That's why I couldn't familiar.
And was put through the ringer by the cereal industry in Australia when he started helping patients, because he, being an orthopedic surgeon, he got sick and tired of having to amputate the limbs off of type 2 diabetic patients. And so what he started doing was suggesting to the patients that they start to take up a ketogenic lifestyle to help them manage their diabetes. And he started to resolve diabetes for a lot of his patients and put it into full remission and sort of bring people completely off all of their medication and stuff. And he ruffled a few feathers with that because he's an orthopedic surgeon, not a GP, not a nutritionist, so on and so forth. And similar to Professor Tim Noakes, and they happened more or less at the same time as well. And they both got referred to their respective boards for malpractice, and they had to go through this whole investigation and sort of legal battle to defend themselves and defend the fact that they were using a ketogenic lifestyle as part of their interventions. And Belinda, Gary's wife, I don't think she's a journalist by trade, but she would make one of the best investigative journalists I've ever come across, because she went into the deep end and found a whole bunch of stuff on the influence of the cereal industry in Gary's case, found memos and emails and all sorts. But she also went even further and sort of uncovered the origins of the entire dietetics and nutritionist discipline. And it all stems from the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Really?
It's a really interesting piece. It's a really interesting piece. You should look it up. I think she's got it on her YouTube channel. She's got a really good discussion there with slides with all the sort of referencing, so you can go and check it up afterwards. But it's very eye-opening. And it like when you understand that, when you've looked at the history and you understand where they've come from, what they're pushing at the moment will make a lot more sense to you.
Yeah, it's understandable. It'll be good reading material for me for the weekend.
Cool. Christopher, we're going to wrap up shortly. Before we do, is there anything else that you would like to highlight to the audience, which for you would be a key takeaway for them? If they were to take away one thing from this discussion, what would you want that to be?
I think it's going to go back to the definition of what I believe is metabolic health is, use food as medicine. Don't rely on pharmaceuticals. And my whole goal of my campaign is to get people away from the pharmaceutical industry and start relying on their own natural health. So
awesome.
That's my main focus.
I love that. Well, thank you very much for your time, sir. I really appreciate it. You've been absolutely wonderful. And I hope to have you on again sometime soon.
Likewise. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Hey folks, thank you for joining us for today's episode. If you found this discussion useful and informative, please be sure to give the channel a like, and please also subscribe so that you may stay up to date with upcoming episodes and exclusive content as and when they are released. Just a reminder that this podcast is made possible thanks to my work as a Zinzino independent partner and Zinzino's brilliant test-based personalized nutrition concept. If you feel like you would like to know more about Zinzino's product offering, or you are interested in potentially joining me as an independent partner yourself, you will find a survey linked in the episode description. Please feel free to complete this survey. It only takes a minute, and in return, I will provide you with a personalized product recommendation, and I will also personally reach out to you to see if there's any questions or queries I can answer. Thanks again, and looking forward to having you back soon.